And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
So we're back. Welcome to Cover One, the Draft Podcast. I'm Russell Brown. As always, joining me, CP Christian Page. My man, how we doing?
Doing well. Good to always be talking ball with you, Russ.
Yes, absolutely. On a fine Thursday evening. Tomorrow's Friday. Then it's the weekend. It's great. But we are essentially, 4 or 5 days removed from the combine. And we never did a winners, losers type of conversation, but I think it's a conversation that we need to have because, last week we did 2 shows back to back. We did a Friday show where we talked briefly about the offensive line guys, and then offensive guys, excuse me. And then we gave kind of a defensive preview, but here we are today and everything's wrapped up, everything's done. And there's certainly some guys that stood out in a big way. And I mean, we're not going to get to all 300 players, but we can certainly get into quite a few guys. I don't know if you want to start on a certain side of the football or if you just want to jump right into winners and just go down the list of guys that really stood out for us.
I feel like it's funny because I just said, hey, yeah, we can just do winners and losers as part of the episode, but just an idea, just throwing it out there for the combine. The edge class as a whole, I mean, I guess maybe it's just because Chase Young and Caleb on Chason did not participate in really anything outside, as far as physical testing goes. It was a very underwhelming group, in my opinion. I'm sure you agree, and, sure, not all – numbers are equal in this sense because some are DNs, some are kind of those tweeners between, that 5-tech role, sometimes maybe pushed in depending on scheme and situation on defense, maybe flushed inside a little bit. Some guys are in a 2-point stance, just simply rushing the passer. But, there's just some numbers out there that I just wasn't overly impressed with as far as some of those upper echelon edge guys. I mean, you look at somebody like, AJ Epineza, who – I'd say consensus is probably like maybe the 3rd or 4th round edge / defensive end prospect. But when you have a 5.04 40, you have a 7.34 3-cone, which is not bad for given his physical presence. But I don't know, he didn't necessarily look like that dominant specimen that we kind of had hoped for. I mean, I don't think some of his numbers came away disappointing, but maybe just compared to some of those other contemporaries that can kind of be that, immediate spark across that defensive line, like a Young, like a Chason. And maybe those guys athletically are just in the realm of their own. But I don't know, just this edge class as a whole didn't really come away as, oh my gosh, there's some guys that are creeping up in the radar. And I know we talked about that in the last episode, but I mean, I guess I'll just leave it up to you. What were your thoughts maybe on just this edge and pass rusher group as a whole at the combine?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Epinesa was a disappointment. I mean, running that in 5 seconds, and it's something certainly where you look at the tape. And I mean, every time I watched him, he was never a guy that I never saw an incredibly high motor from him. And it was, I kind of questioned some of the things that he could do athletically, but I thought with the length and kind of that blend of power and some of the explosiveness that he would show off a snap, I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, he seemed like a player that you can mold and kind of not build your defense around, but add to your defense, and you can get some solid production out of it, at least for 5 years on a rookie contract. But here we are. I mean, we're kind of wondering, is this guy going to fall into the late 20s now? I mean, is he an option for a team like the Buffalo Bills who have a need for an edge rusher? But a guy that I really liked was Jabari Zuniga out of Florida. I liked him going into the year. I liked him during the year. He can't stay healthy for whatever reason. He tends to get injured, but he had a good combine for a guy that needed to have a good combine to prove that he's worthy of being a I will say a top 75 pick. And I think he can be that. And I think the combine solidified that with a 4.64 40. He did it at 264 pounds, almost 33-inch arms. He had a 33-inch vertical. So he tested pretty well. And even though at times on tape he looks either whether he's playing too high and looks a little too stiff, he still, to me, showed that, hey, he can be that powerful, not powerful, but that blend of speed and kind of that good bend that you want to see out of an edge rusher. So I'm curious to see where he ends up landing in the draft process, because I think he's a fine fit for a team that needs that stand-up edge rusher. So I thought he really had a good day at the combine. But obviously the other guy for me is the guy that I've been hyping up probably on every podcast, Devon Hamilton. I thought he had a good showing at 320 pounds to run that 40 at 5.1 seconds. I mean, yeah, I know that's what Mekhi Becton did at almost 370 pounds, but I mean, it's impressive for Devon Hamilton, who needed to show some athletic ability because for whatever reason, Ohio State didn't always keep him on the field. He would start the first 3 series of a game, and then he would rotate in like every other series throughout the rest of the game. So he's a player that is a stout run defender, so powerful. He had he's got 33-inch arms. He had 33 reps in the bench. So he's a player that, I think if you're looking in the second and third round, you can get a valuable defensive tackle that can play a nose, can play shaded on a guard. I like Hamilton a lot. But I'm with you in a sense that there was nothing that really like stood out. A guy like Trayvon Hill out of Miami, for example, 240 pounds, 245 pounds. I mean, he had a less than a 30-inch vertical. I think he ran a 4.9 40. And this was a guy, I think going into the year, you saw some explosive plays and you're like, okay, I mean, if this guy can put it together, maybe he can help Miami with their defense, but also help himself and maybe become a top 100 pick or whatever. And here he is. I don't see that. I mean, I would be kind of surprised if we saw him taken earlier than the 6th round. So there wasn't a ton of, like you said, edge rushers and defensive linemen that stood out. But what about like linebackers? I mean, I think Malik Harrison certainly had himself a day. And I kind of said this in our group chat last night. I'm posting clips from when I was scouting him in the summer and last year and throughout parts of this year. And I'm like, why are people just now noticing like this guy's pretty good? I mean, he's not great, but he's pretty good, and his athletic ability shows on tape. He had a 36-inch vertical. He ran a 4.65 at almost 250 pounds. So, I mean, this is a guy that's got good length. He's 6'3". He's got some explosiveness in his game. So he stood out to me in a big way. Did you have any linebackers that maybe stood out or didn't stand out for you?
Yeah, no, I definitely think he's one that definitely stood out. I mean, just looking at, some of his numbers, the 6'8", 3 cone, which is really solid for a guy with mass and just a solid in general, if you think about it. But he shows that on tape. I know, in man coverage situations, he has that short area quickness to really explode to the football. And I really like his film overall. And like you said, you were talking about him in months past, and he definitely answered the call. I got another guy that you've also been talking about too, and this guy that I wanted to really see take that next step forward. He had some back-end first-round buzz. I think he's probably still a top 50 pick, but Zach Bond, the outside linebacker out of Wisconsin, ran a 4.65, a 4.31 shuttle, 7 even, 3 cone, 32.5-inch vertical, 9.7 broad, and 24 bench reps. So Bond checked the boxes as far as an athletic testing goes for me. I watched him in some of the drills. He looked pretty fluid. That was one thing I wanted him to see without the football pads on, which is rare. You don't hear me say that often, but from maybe just an athletic standpoint, I want to see how, his movement skills are overall. So Zach Bond definitely, I don't want to say impressed me, but maybe in a sense got me, maybe more on board with seeing him as a top 50 pick. So he's definitely a guy that stood out. But
especially a guy like Zach Bond who, doesn't have the longest arms in the world at 6'2", and it shows on tape because he does this like hesitation pass rush. I'm sure there's a specific term for it. And I know quite a few of the pass rush moves, but for whatever reason, I don't. It's just like he tries to fake out an offensive lineman, and he'll like act like he's dropping into coverage, and then he rushes forward. And every single time he does it, he gets the edge because he's got that ability that knack to like dip his shoulder. And when he goes through, he gets pressure on the quarterback, but they get rid of the football almost every time. And he has to like jump in the air to try to block the pass, but he can't do it because his arms are so short. And it's like, man, if you were just like an inch and a half taller and a little bit longer, you would be a guaranteed first round pick. I think he could go in the first round, but like he's on that, like you said, a top 50 pick, more of a border first, second rounder. And I think if he was a little bit longer, he'd be a guaranteed first round pick because he's got that ability, that knack to dip that shoulder and bend to the quarterback, unlike some other guys in this draft. How about Willie Gay out of Mississippi State?
Yeah.
He blew it up. 243 pounds, they were predictions that he was going to run a 4.3 or 4.4 4.4, and he came out and he ran a 4.46. But he had a 39.5-inch vertical, a broad jump of 11.4. Obviously, the athletic ability is there, but he only started 6 games for Mississippi State this past year. And if I remember correctly, he did have some off-the-field stuff where there's a lot of question marks there of kind of the character of what he brings. But obviously, with that athletic ability, I mean, that's Devin Bush. That's Devin White range of athletic ability. So, I mean, where do we value a guy like this? I mean, I was trying to check the tape, and I watched 2 games last night or really the last couple of days of Mississippi State, and I didn't see him. I didn't see him a whole lot. So, I mean, I don't know, like, where do we start with him if there's not a ton of film on him, or do we just base it off of athletic ability?
I mean, maybe he's kind of that modern day kind of tweener type role, whether you want to stick him in the box, stick him the rest of the passer, just in coverage reps. And just with his athletic profile, he's a guy that you think doesn't have to come off the field. But when you turn on his film, like you said, there's a little bit of inconsistency because he's not always in the game. His film overall is just a little inconsistent. So I don't know. It's weird because I'm not saying these guys are kind of an anomaly, but they're just kind of forgotten because they didn't play that much football, so we didn't know that much about them. So when they come away with these incredible athletic testing numbers, you are stunned, you are shocked. And so I don't know. He's definitely one of those guys too, like you just alluded to. You see those numbers, those impressive way above average numbers, and that tempts you to go back and watch the tape. And I like it when players do that at the combine. Willie Gay is definitely one of those guys that's going to make you go back and watch that. Some guys that you've already seen a lot of the tape and they're just checking boxes, and that's Patrick Queen running a 4.5 flat, and then Kenneth Murray running a 4.52. I think after you look at somebody like Isaiah Simmons, if you're putting him as your top linebacker, regardless of his position, I think those are the next 2 guys to come off the board. And now there are some linebacker needy teams, maybe, as early as Carolina at 7, more of a middle inside linebacker role. I think that's definitely a rich spot for guys like this, but I think you could definitely, validate that with some of the athletic numbers. But I guess both of them came away with hamstring pulls or something like that. So obviously that shouldn't be a big deal as far as draft projection goes. But
well, let's say you're Carolina, you're picking 7th. You can't. I mean, you just traded Trey Turner for Russell Okung, which I don't understand.
Yeah, I didn't get that at all either.
I don't know. Like, is that the Chargers tipping their hand saying, hey, we're taking an offensive tackle, whatever it might be? I mean, let's say it falls like that. Simmons is off the board already for Carolina. Let's say he's their top-ranked guy to replace Luke Kuechly. Are they in a position? I certainly think they could be in a position to trade back. Let's say the team, that team could be Tampa Bay Bucks or the Las Vegas Raiders. They want to move up, get up into 7, and then let's say the Panthers move to 12 or 14. Would you be okay with them looking at a player like a Kenneth Murray or Patrick Queen?
Oh, for sure, because I don't think that's really probably reaching that far up their board. And if you can just gain assets as far as draft pick goes, I definitely think that's a viable option because I just don't I understand, the potential to get a guy like Derek Brown to solidify that interior because Carolina's rush defense was really pitiful last year, and that's even with a Hall of Fame linebacker like Luke Kuechly. But, maybe if they want to start in the middle of the defense and then work their way up and get, somebody later on in the 2nd round, 3rd round in that defensive line category, I think it's definitely set up for them to do that.
Yeah.
But it just may depend on how valuable they have with a guy like Derek Brown. And who's to say that? I mean, I think Isaiah Simmons will be gone before 7, but, maybe some quarterback needy teams or, somebody scoots up there ahead of them and picks a quarterback, and that pushes Isaiah Simmons, who, I mean, might be, from an athletic profile, could be the best player in this draft. So I don't know. There's a lot of options Carolina can do with their situation at 7, but it's just kind of with that new regime, you don't know really what identity they have, what direction they're going to go, because I don't think it's completely fair to write them off at a quarterback at number 7. I doubt it happens, but I don't know. There's a lot of directions that Carolina can go, but if they want to go linebacker and Isaiah Simmons is already selected ahead of them, I think trading back would be a really smart decision.
For sure. And one last thing on the defensive line. I mean, I know we were talking linebackers, but forgot to mention my boy Neville Gallimore, who runs a 4.79, freakishly fast there in a straight line, but asking him to change that direction, it takes a minute. 7.97 in the 3 cone, short shuttle of 5 seconds. So certainly not the guy that you need flipping his hips and kind of changing that direction. But again, I think the tape checks out. As I wrote before the Senior Bowl, this is a guy that is disruptive on the interior. He's going to play the interior. You're not going to ask him, despite the versatility, you're not going to ask him to stand up off the edge and rush the passer. But get him in a kind of in a phone booth, and I think he's going to win a lot of the time. And I think at the same time, he's going to outwork just about anybody on a defensive line, because he's going to, get to the line of scrimmage. He's going to win at the point of attack. He's going to get to the heels of an offensive lineman, and he's going to bend to the ball carrier, to the direction of the football wherever it goes. And it might take him a couple of split seconds longer to flip those hips and turn in that direction. But once he gets on his horse, he's going to make up for it. So what's your spin on him? I mean, do we think he goes in the first round because of the 40 time, because of the tape, or do you think some of those agility drills push him back? Because I think he could still be a first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I'm always going to value film over all of that, what you just said. I know you do too. And that's why you had him ranked so highly coming into events like the Senior Bowl and the Scouting Combine just recently. But I don't know. I think he has, tape that's on that borderline threshold of first and second round. The agility drills with defensive linemen always throw me for a loop. Because, I mean, if we're going to dive into it, we might as well address the elephant in the room, and that's Derek Brown's very poor testing numbers.
Yeah.
But it's strange, and with Brown's situation and even Gallimore's situation, on film, you see their explosive, first set of quickness. You see, their ability to kind of, keep their head down, explode through contact. You see that short area quickness. You see a little bit of that lateral agility. So it's kind of awkward, I guess, with some of their numbers, because it definitely doesn't really dictate what they're capable of just based on what we've seen on film. So I don't know how much stock some people, and when I say people, NFL evaluators, front office personnel members, put in agility drills because, when you're looking at tape like Gallimore and even Derek Brown, you just don't really see all of those hiccups that they showed at the combine. And I don't know if it's just, a focus on, getting everything and just being nervous for that situation. I mean, I doubt that's it, but maybe it's just when, the lights are on, they're just a whole different human being, which is probably true. That's probably what we're looking at. So I don't know. Defensive line agility drills are just really strange to me. I don't want to say I don't put stock in them, but I'm not going to let it make or break really a grade unless they're just god awful.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if he came out and it was like 9 seconds, like Derek Brown, for example, if he came out and ran that, I mean, it was pretty close, but
far off.
Yeah. But I mean, like you mentioned, I mean, the tape checks out. He's disruptive. He's so powerful. I mean, if we were, let's say he was going through let's say there's he's going through bag drills or something and he's hitting that bag. I bet you any money he's probably hitting that bag harder than just about any defensive lineman through the group. I mean, he's just so powerful and he's so massive that it's going to make things, I think, a lot different. Teams are going to scheme around him. And if, let's say he does fall, let's say he has an Aaron Donald-like fall in the draft where he goes 13 to the Colts. Okay. That's a Colts win all day, because they're gonna take him, and he's going to be brilliant in that defense. So it's one of those things where it's like, don't overthink it. I still think he's a top 5 player in the draft. I think he's well worth of being considered a top 5 pick. Probably more so to the Lions than any of the teams in the top 5. But I mean, I don't think anybody's going to trade up to get him. But if you can trade back and you can still get him, I think it's a win. Because like we talked about with drafting a linebacker, if you're the Panthers, if you move back and you get a linebacker out of it, it might be a reach to some people. But if you're getting assets and you're getting your need off the board, then I think it's fine. So we'll see what happens with Derek Brown. I mean, I'm not overlooking it. I still think he can be a very, very good player in this draft. I think he's going to be a very good player in the future. So we'll see. But a player that we talked about last week going into the defensive combine or the defensive side of the combine, Jeremy Chin from Southern Illinois, and then Kyle Duggar, Lenoir-Rhyne. Both players, I think, had a very good combine. Jeremy Chin, for sure. He had a 41-inch vertical behind Duggar's 42-inch jump, but he had 11.6 broad jump. He ran a 4.45. I mean, Jeremy Chin, just a big bodied guy at 6'3", 221, and standing next to him at the Senior Bowl, he's every bit of that. And he brings you some versatility, because I think, when you look at a guy like an Xavier McKinney or an Isaiah Simmons, you can kind of utilize them all over the field. Well, I think the same thing can happen here with Chin, where he can be utilized all over the field, covering in the slot, playing up in the box, being a single high safety. And I think the same thing can happen with Kyle Duggar. So out of those two, which one gets drafted first?
I think the hype right now surrounds Duggar a little more, but I think I'm with you on Chin. I think maybe if you can get a little value, I mean, they're probably both day 2 guys, so value, it's kind of difficult to really evaluate there. But with Chin, I completely agree. He can come downhill, he can play in the box, he's a stud in the run game, but he also has really good ball skills. Not to say Duggar doesn't, but I like you referencing an Xavier McKinney role, just that versatility that Chin can really offer, and Duggar maybe more of that. Hey, let's kind of get him in run situations, let him play downhill a little bit, but he also has some reliable pass coverage ability as well. I think Chin's maybe a little cleaner in that regard, so maybe there's more versatility in that sense. So you don't have to strictly look for the strong safety or look for that free safety. You get a guy that can just be utilized, can be utilized in a bunch of different areas. So I lean more towards Duggar based on just the hype that's surrounding him at the moment, but I think I like Chin's upside maybe just a little more.
I can't disagree. I mean, like I said, I like Chin quite a bit. I like him in the box. I think that versatility really stands out. I do think Duggar's going to get drafted first, like you mentioned, and I think he's going to go in the first round. I'm going to be honest. I think, teams like, Miami even at 26, if they keep that pick, if they keep all of their 3 first-round picks, and let's say McKinney and Delpit are gone, or maybe they just value Duggar a little bit more. I could see it happening. They could utilize a safety in their defense. A team like San Francisco, Kansas City, both teams could utilize a safety. And depending on what Tennessee does with their secondary, nothing's guaranteed there. They could be making some changes this offseason. We'll see in a couple of weeks when free agency starts on March 15th. But Duggar, for me, I think is a first-round pick, just simply because a lot of teams are going to, I think, put some value and stock into his combine and the fact that you can mold that guy into something. But I do like Jeremy Chin a little bit more. But I feel like we've seen a recent trend over the years where the back end of the first round, there's kind of like just some historic kind of moment happen. And I think him coming out of Lenoir-Rhyne would be one of those moments. So we'll see. And again, his combine speaks for itself. We have his tape in our folder, and I've been watching bits and pieces of it because it's broken down. It's really weird tape. I wish they would have just sent the whole game, but it's broken down into like little chunks of like the wide zone field to the end zone, which is fine, but you're like trying to find you're like literally spending more time searching than you are watching. And maybe it's just because it's a small school, but I like both players for sure. CJ Henderson, another one of those guys that certainly won the weekend, just with a 4.39 40. So many people were concerned about what he was going to run. And I think that's simply because they've got Tease Tabor on their mind from when he was drafted by the Lions. But also, I mean, he had a 20 reps in the bench. And, at 204 pounds, we saw some moves this past week. A.J. Bayou from the Jaguars got dealt to the Broncos. We have the Broncos at 15, who's probably going to move on from, Chris Harris, but they could very well look at another corner as well. So, I mean, 9 to 15, is it crazy to view Henderson as the second-ranked corner in this draft, or is it crazy to think that we could see 3 corners, or is it not crazy to think of 3 corners drafted in the top 15 at this point because of need and kind of the value and the athletic ability that you're getting out of all 3 corners of Okudah, Henderson, and Fulton?
Yeah, I feel like 3 is a little too rich, even though I like all 3 guys that you just listed. I definitely think Henderson being the second picked cornerback in this class is definitely a possibility. I mean, like you said, I think some of his tackling, quote-unquote, issues are a little overblown. Sure, I get it, but, as an outside corner, yeah, sure, you want to be able to consistently tackle, but I don't think he's as timid as a tackler as some people may indicate. As long as you're there and you can make contact, and surely, you're not the last line of defense. And at that point, if they catch the ball 45 yards downfield, you're toast anyways. So who cares, in my opinion? But I don't think he has physical limitations as maybe some people like to indicate. I know, sure, that's not to say he doesn't have anything to clean up. He definitely does have things to clean up in that regard. But just from a pure coverage standpoint, he is one of the best corners in this class. So I'm totally buying that he could be the second cornerback picked. As far as, just pure corners and overall ability, I think Fulton's still your guy in that situation. But I like all 3 guys. But I think 3 guys picked in the top 15 may be just a little rich at this point.
How dare you? How dare you? I think it could happen. It's probably rich, but
I think it could happen. I just think, if we're betting on it right now, I'd be more comfortable saying 2, maybe even more comfortable saying just 1.
Yeah, I would probably agree there, but you never know. I mean, what if? I mean, we'll see. I mean, who knows? If the Lions trade back far enough and Okudah falls to the Giants, what if the Giants value Okudah really high? They take him, and then the Lions, wherever they fall in the teens somewhere, maybe they take the difference between Fulton and Henderson, and then Jaguars, they take their pick of Fulton and Henderson as well, because it certainly seems like the Jaguars would be, at this point, destined to take some type of defensive player. And if you're trading away a corner and you traded away Jalen Ramsey, you need a corner. So I don't know. We'll see. But other defensive players, as far as secondary guys, do you have a loser in mind or another winner in mind?
I kind of have a weird situation, a weird player. So I didn't really dive into his film until the scouting combine because he came away with pretty impressive numbers. But that's Harrison Hand, the cornerback out of Temple. He ran a 4.52, a 4.27 on the shuttle, a 7.153 cone, a 41-inch vertical, an 11.1 broad with 14 reps on the bench. So opened up his film, watched him against UCF. I don't know how on earth he posted these numbers because he does not play the same way. He looks very stiff as far as transitions go. He doesn't seem like he has that vertical speed. He has a lot of choppy footwork, and his back pedal is just kind of not I guess the par as far as technique goes. So his was kind of one of those weird, okay, hey, you posted really good numbers. Let's go back to the tape, turn on the tape, and you're like, did you change numbers that game? Because I just didn't necessarily see it. His was kind of strange, and a guy that, that kind of had some maybe top 75 potential. Cameron Dantzler, the Mississippi State cornerback, ran a 4.64. I think he kind of underwhelmed probably with a 34.5-inch vertical. He was a guy that was kind of a polarizing prospect, kind of I don't know, his situation was kind of different at Mississippi State, but kind of a longer, thinner guy that plays more of a physical role, but may not, meet that threshold based on some athletic testing. So Dantzler is a guy I think that's definitely lost as far as we're looking at the secondary. I guess as far as, winners, Harrison Hand won as far as athletic contests, but or athletic testing, but his film is just odd. I'll still watch his whole season, but his film is just odd based on the numbers he put up in Indy.
Before the combine, I watched one game of Hand from 2018, and it was like, okay, this guy's got some feistiness to him, but like you mentioned, it was like he looked, I thought, small on tape, and I thought he played small. Like he he wasn't necessarily matching up to the competition. But again, it was only one game. So obviously he's one of those guys that we have to watch more of, especially when you got a guy like Cam Dantzler who underwhelmed a lot, because at 6'2", 188, you're like, okay, I can work with that. But then he comes in, he's only got, he's got arms under 31 inches, and then he runs this 4.6. Now, I liked him, a 4.64. So I liked him in zone. I thought, okay, he does a pretty good job with recognition here, and he shows some kind of the short area quickness that you need and that ability to kind of turn and flip. But then at the same time, you see the straight line speed, and you're like, if I'm a man coverage team, the Lions, I'm not drafting this guy because he doesn't have the track speed that I need to recover, and he really lacks the length to make any play on the football despite being 6'2". So I really wonder – people say he could be a good press corner. I disagree. I really wonder where we could see him go. I mean, I don't think I thought he had an option to be maybe like the 40th pick in the draft. I think more so now he's probably closer to the 65th, 70th pick in the draft. So that's like the difference of a good combine or an average combine compared to a bad one. So I'm with you there. Any other players? Obviously, I mean, I don't want to go all day on defensive players or really even offensive players, but is there any player that you think from the combine went from being out of the first round to maybe a guaranteed first rounder? And if, like, obviously we're not going to say Derek Brown or anything like that, but some of those borderline guys that we thought, okay, he makes sense going here to 26th overall, but he still might end up going 35th overall. Do you have any of those guys in mind?
That's a tough question because it's kind of like when they're grouped in that 25 range, that means they're probably grouped in, 25 to pretty much 50. I mean, let's be honest. And I think a lot of those probably in that wide receiver category. But maybe for the sake of, guys performing well, like Justin Jefferson and Denzel Mims, maybe that kicks out guys like a Jalen Reagor. Or I know I'm not saying Brandon Ayuk performed poorly because I think he did really well. But, having maybe Denzel Mims kind of slip up there, that maybe more of the versatile scheme-friendly fit than a guy like Ayuk or Reagor. Maybe he slips up ahead of them and maybe just comes a back-end first-round option. So I don't know. I think maybe just with how fluid kind of this wide receiver class is outside of maybe the top four guys, that's really the only one I can really think of as far as just maybe some fluidity there. I don't necessarily think that many guys play themselves out of a first round unless you have somebody in mind. I mean, I still think A.J. Epineza, his film's good enough to be picked in the first round. I may value him more just as a player in round two. I think Yetur Gross-Matos was good enough to be in that back end of the first round conversation. So I don't know. I didn't see really anybody perform that poorly to kick them out of the first round. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have anybody that – I mean, I think Justin Jefferson's a first-round pick at this point. I think he's just too damn productive. I think his tape's pretty good. And on top of it, he's athletic as hell. So I think teams like the Eagles, the Bills, maybe even the Patriots in that early 20 range are going to really value him. And also you've got the Saints. I wish we would have seen – the agility drills from Yetur Gross-Matos. I wish we would have seen him come out, do a 3-cone drill in under 7 seconds, run like a 4.55, 4.6 40, because I think he would have put a top 20 stamp on his draft stock. And now it's kind of like, well, you had 20 reps, you only had a 34-inch vertical. It's all good numbers at 6'5", 266, and he's got almost 35-inch arms. But I'm with you on Yetur Gross-Matos. I think, I think the tape shows a first-round player, but I really wonder if teams are going to value him in the same way. It's always interesting to see what the teams will do. One question I have as far as running backs, do you think there's going to be a running back in the first round? And if so, I mean, is it Jonathan Taylor? Is it Cam Akers? Is it DeAndre Swift? Because I think Jonathan Taylor could end up in the first round. Me personally, I think he's worth taking a look at, especially at 5'10", 226, a 4.39 40, 36-inch vertical. I mean, the numbers are impressive. I don't care what anybody says. And if you watch the tape, whether he's playing behind an NFL offensive line or not, it doesn't matter. He's going to the next level. He's playing behind an NFL offensive line. He's going to be just as productive. Maybe not 2,000 yards, but he's going to be damn good.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he would be my choice for the first running back selected. I mean, I think you could make a case with DeAndre Swift because he had a fine day as well in Indianapolis, and Cam Akers, like you said. I mean, all the analysts, Twitter, everybody was raving about him on the on-field agility drills, and they should have. I mean, they were very justified. He looked very fluid. And when he can be selfish, he can worry about himself and not worry about the garbage personnel that he had at Florida State and he had to work with for his whole career. And it was a really poor situation. So he's going to be a guy that definitely has a better NFL career than college. I'll put money on that all day, every day. But yeah, as far as just talking about the running backs as a whole, I don't want to say J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State lost money, but he didn't really help himself by not participating in anything. And the reason I say that, it's not the fact that I don't think he's going to test well, but the fact that, the guy that he's battling maybe for that RB1 spot, Jonathan Taylor, I mean, you just read out all the numbers. He killed it with even more emphasis than we probably thought he would. DeAndre Swift did his thing. Cam Akers did his thing. And even though, Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't do all the agility drills as far as time goes on the field, he still put up some solid numbers with a 10-3 jump, a 39.5-inch vertical, which is very solid. And for him, a 4.6 40 is pretty good because he's not this burner type that you see on film. But I think, as long as he just stayed under that 4.65 threshold, I think that was just fine. He knew he wasn't going to run fast, but I commend him. I give him, a lot of courage points for going out there and be like, hey, you know what, screw it. I'm going to run this 40. I'm not going to be fast, but people trust my tape and, I can go forward with that. So I don't know. J.K. Dobbins, I don't want to say necessarily that he's going to, go from, a top 20 guy to, in that 30 round or that, 35 to 40 round range. But from a projection, I'm not ruling that out because I think these running backs definitely answer the call with maybe that void given by Dobbins as far as those top 4 or 5 running backs go.
And I'm with you on, going from the offensive side of the football to the defensive side of the football. You go from, the running backs, I'm going to the safeties here. I thought Xavier McKinney, could very well be the first safety off the board. We've already talked about Chin and Duggar, but what about Grant Delpit? I mean, there's plenty of question marks surrounding him not being an efficient tackler. Where's he at as far as the injuries go? He checked in at 6'2", 213, but he didn't test. And, I mean, sure, he could do his stuff at the pro day. Everything will probably be fine. And I think he's still worth being a first-round pick. But does the league view it that way? And if not, I mean, if they like Duggar and Chin a little bit more because they were better interviews, because Kyle Duggar blew the interviews away from everything that we heard, well, we're not necessarily hearing that about Grant Delpit. I'm not saying we're hearing bad things about him, but we're not necessarily hearing those things. So maybe Delpit's not a first-round pick, and he's one of those guys like we've seen in years past. Justin Reed, a prime example. I thought he was a first-round corner. You had the kid last year, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, first-round safety. And he didn't go in the first round. You got a guy like Grant Delpit. I think he's a first-rounder, but I don't know if he's going to go in the first round. I mean, not testing, some question marks on his tape, and then just some question marks as far as injuries. I really wonder what happens there. So the combine, it's over. It's said and done with. Do you have anything you want to add, elaborate, agree, disagree?
Man, we covered pretty much about everything. I mean, trust the tape. Film is fact. Hashtag them all. Because, some of these numbers we can get crazy about, and sometimes they accentuate something you see on film. But like we used Harrison Hand, the Temple corner, for an example, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be this all-star athlete on the field, even though I know they tested well in the underwear Olympics, but it's called that for a reason, because when the helmets and pads come on, they could be a totally different player. You can use that same example for guys like Derek Brown and even Neville Gallimore, the Oklahoma D tackle that we talked about. Some of those agility drills didn't go as planned, but their tape is pretty solid. So I don't know. You can use examples from both ends of the spectrum. Trust the tape, film is fact, go forward with that, and you'll be just fine as the evaluator goes.
I'm with you. I think you got to trust the tape. You have to follow your gut on a player especially, but also, again, refer back to the tape every time you're in doubt. And the combine, it's a good measuring tool. Don't get me wrong. You can definitely utilize it, and you can use it to your advantage when scouting and grading guys, but at the same time, don't overvalue it because it can hurt you, and it probably will burn you a time or two. So don't base your entire board off of just what the combine says. Trust the tape and all that good stuff. So
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
Tristan Wirfs is a tackle. If you say he's a guard,
you're an idiot.
Your friend anymore. The only situation where I can buy it, Jedrick Wills is kind of put in this same boat because both guys are very athletic. They look really well. They're very smooth. They're very explosive. They're mean, nasty guys, can play at the second level, blah, blah, blah. They check all the boxes. The only situation where I think it is valid for you to say they're a guard is if you have two solid left and right tackles, which half the teams don't have, and you just want them on your team as far as a board scenario goes, and they just fall in your lap and you go the best player available route. And then if you want to stick them at guard, then I can get on board with that. I still think you need to try them at tackle, but that's the only way I can get on board. That's one of my biggest things when it comes to the combine. It may have anything to do with how their numbers came out from a measurement or agility standpoint, but just the conversation that arises, whether it's media people talking, draft analysts, or even NFL personnel members, be like, yeah, we'll kick them inside, be no problem. It's not to say that Wills and Wirfs couldn't be all pros inside, because they probably could be. I mean, if you have those transitive skills from tackle to guard, you play with that same demeanor, those same feet, that same athletic ability, you're going to be just fine. But put the guys at their best position, and that would be at tackle as far as Wirfs and Wills. And there's probably other examples. I know we talked about Andrew Thomas in weeks past. Some people want to label him there too. But go back to the tape. Like I said, it just all goes back to that. Trust the tape, film is fact, put the guys where they can best accentuate their skills. That's my soapbox. That's my TED Talk for the day. We can sign off with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to say anything more. I agree 100%. I think we very well have 5 offensive tackles here in the draft from Austin Jackson all the way down to Tristan Wirfs and Andrew Thomas and everything in between. So I'm with you. You guys, of course, can follow us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, @_Christian Page. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, however you listen to your podcast. Search Cover One NFL Draft Podcast. You will find us there. Again, rate, review, and subscribe. Smash the follow button on Twitter. Until next week, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.